When my dad was very ill in 2019 and was in intensive care, it was the farming community around us who made sure that when my mum and I came home from hospital, there was a ready-made lasagna on the kitchen table for us, that we wouldn't have to cook, that there was food there for us. There were farmers picking up the phone and saying, I fed the stock, so you don't have to come home, stay in hospital, everything's okay with the livestock. And little things like that, they don't ask for thanks. They don't It never crosses their mind. They just go and do and help and support.
Welcome back to ModCons. Today I'm joined by Samuel Kurtz, Conservative member of the Senedd for Carmarthen West and South Pembrokeshire since 2021. Samuel Kurtz is our man in Wales, serving as Shadow Cabinet Secretary for Economy, Energy and Rural Affairs. He is a champion for farmers and a strong national voice against Labour's bizarre family farm tax. He was elected to the Pembrokeshire County Council in 2017 and worked as a journalist and a Conservative press officer. And we are absolutely delighted to have him with us today on ModCons. Sam, thank you so much for joining me today.
No, thank you very much for the invite. Really looking forward to it.
So, Sam, you are the Conservative Senedd member for Carmarthen West and South Pembrokeshire. Could you tell us a bit about what a member of the Senedd does and what your role entails?
We are a national parliament for Wales, formerly an assembly. We're no longer an assembly. We used to be known as assembly members. We are now members of the Senedd. We are a national parliament. We have full lawmaking powers. A lot of people will argue that the laws being made in Wales are bonkers, and I would agree with them on a whole host of those.
There are a lot of things that are devolved to Wales. The big one, obviously, is the NHS. And in the last election, we spoke a lot about like the dire handling of things like National Health Service by Welsh Labour. But because of anger at the Conservatives, it didn't really cut through. And what's the state of the National Health Service in Labour-run Wales now? Now that they have a national Labour government, obviously, you know, a lot of devolved leaders like to say that that would transform their fortunes. Have things actually improved in the last year and a half?
If you speak to patients and staff on the ground, no. They will argue that, and they did before and subsequently since the election, not last year, the year before now, of course, we're in the new year,
Yeah.
that two Labour governments working either side of the M4 will deliver prosperity, will deliver reduced waiting lists, deliver this panacea of rainbows and unicorns. The reality is very, very different.
Mm.
And the Conservatives, when we were in government, we offered support in the NHS when post-COVID, where we saw a huge spike across the board in every health service in the United Kingdom, waiting lists spiked due to the pandemic. What we saw was a setting up of surgical hubs and diagnostic hubs in England, which reduced those waiting lists considerably and quite quickly. The offer was made by the NHS in England under a Conservative government. Look, Wales, we can see you're struggling. How can we help? And instead of accepting that help, a Labour government in Wales said, that's just politicising the issue. We're going to be stubborn and carry on in our own way, not doing things or doing things differently for the sake of doing things differently,
Right.
not for a benefit for the patient or for staff, just to be different for different sake.
In the case of devolution, it can feel a bit more apparent. Like when you have a bad devolved leader, like in London, we have Sadiq Khan, who's absolutely terrible. It can be
Yeah.
incredibly damaging. But of course, there are very many cases where devolution has worked well, like Ben Houchen in Tees Valley, formerly, Andy Street in the West Midlands. What in Wales that's devolved do you guys do better than in England, or what should we be looking at in Wales that we should kind of be saying, "Yep, we should try and adopt that here, or could do better here"?
Do you know what? That's a really interesting question. You could take it a step back of going, well, the UK is now a devolved nation
Mm.
in the sense that you've got three devolved administrations in Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland. You've got mayoralties, which are devolved in themselves as well, and they each one has different responsibilities. So there's no uniformity in devolution in the UK,
Mm.
and I think that's something that could be looked at by future governments of saying, how do we look at readdressing this imbalance in certain areas? I'm not advocating for more devolution in Wales. I just think that there could be an opportunity of saying what's the level playing field, so people in London feel the same level of devolution that people in Scotland feel, and vice
Yes,
versa, etc.
absolutely.
What do we do better in Wales around devolution? Well, um, shrug of the shoulders. If you ask a Labour politician, what have they done in Wales via devolution that they can hang their hat on and say this is justification for devolution, they're really scratching the surface or really scratching around things like introducing charges for plastic bags,
Right.
the 20-mile-an-hour
Oh,
default
that
speed limit
awful,
in
awful.
Wales. So when you look at a wholesale, something that's really made people's lives in Wales better, there's nothing that you can pin your hat on. And I think that's a failure of policy. That's Labour's way. They've not wanted to upset the apple cart to maintain power. And with that, they've managed decline. Rather than doing something really drastic, you've got a small country of 3 million, a very flexible, maneuverable, agile government that should be reactive to some of the opportunities that present themselves, be that in the energy sector, be that in some of the opportunities around tourism and international tourism into Wales. Yet they've not done those things because there's not been that ambition. And so, if you ask a lay person in Wales, what has devolution delivered for you? They will like the fact that there is a Welsh Parliament, and all polling shows that there's a
Right.
feeling of it's quite right that Wales has its voice. But when
Mhm.
you ask for a policy, that's when the head scratching starts.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that makes sense. I think people obviously want some kind of sense of self and some sense of autonomy, but they're not getting delivered for by Labour, and it's probably why Labour are going to get the boot in May. But we will come to that.
Yeah.
And so,
Yeah.
so talking about you, you were born and raised on your family farm in Pembrokeshire. What was that like growing up on a farm, and how has that kind of influenced your career so far, I guess?
I had the very best of upbringings. I have two loving parents, an older brother. There's 7 years between my brother and I. And the running joke in the family was always he was born on a tractor and I was born with a book in my hand. How different two brothers could be. But naturally, we've got closer as we've got older, and that 7 year gap has meant far less. And it was lovely having him home and his family for Christmas, actually. So that was really nice. Yeah, it's a rural farm, only quite small, a beef farm. It started off, my grandfather, he was a German prisoner of war
Mhm.
after the Second World War. Managed to rent the farm back in the 50s. Then got into a bit of an accident, had compensation from the accident, motorcycle accident, I think it was. And that was enough money from the compensation to be able to buy the farm that he was renting. My
Wow.
dad was born on the farm in 1960 and has farmed it ever since. So he lost his dad quite young at only 10 years of age. So the farm has been in our hands ever since then, even though we had to, my grandmother had to, who was herself a German migrant after the Second World War, she had to sell some of the land so that they could stay in the farmhouse. She was raising three boys, my father and his two brothers. To stay in the farmhouse, they sold some of the land. So my dad has slowly but surely bought back some of the land of the original
Amazing.
farm. And yeah, it's a really nice story, actually, really rugged. North Pembrokeshire, cliff top. It's hard, barren land. Only certain types of livestock live. No trees grow. But it's a beautiful place as well. And I'm immensely proud of what my parents have achieved
Mm.
on the farm because my mum runs holiday lets, self-catering holiday lets,
Amazing. Love
diversified the
it.
farm, and dad continues to farm as well. So, and for my upbringing, I went to the local school, local con, and I was one of those annoying kids in the sense that I was good academically. I wasn't amazing. I wasn't hitting A stars at A level, but I try everything. I
Mhm.
just wanted to do things, be that sport, be that on stage, music. I played the piano and the cello growing up. I'd play rugby, cricket, football. I turned my hand to stage shows at Christmas time in school. I just like doing stuff.
Nice.
And for me, that gave me a whole host of opportunities. And for a small comprehensive school in West Wales, we were given a whole host of opportunities as well.
Mm.
So I had a really good education. And the community that I was born and brought up in and now represent, everybody knows each other, but in a good way.
Yeah.
No one's in each other's pockets. But um, my father, and the best analogy I give, and I gave this analogy, this story back in 2024 when we had a host of farming protests in Wales over the Sustainable Farming Scheme, Welsh post-Brexit farming scheme, bovine TB and NVZ. So it was SFS, TB and NVZs, the three acronyms. And speaking to 4,500 farmers, they'd all heard speeches about why the policies were bad, but I thought I'm different. I'm come from a farming background, so I'm
Yeah.
not going to lecture farmers who will know more about agriculture than I can ever
Right.
profess to know.
Mm.
So the analogy I gave is why I am so committed to the farming community is when my dad was very ill in 2019 and was in intensive care, it was the farming community around us who made sure that when my mum and I came home from hospital, there was a ready-made lasagna on the kitchen table for us that we
Right.
wouldn't have to cook, that there was food there for us. There were farmers picking up the phone and saying, I fed the stock, so you don't have to come home, stay in hospital, everything's okay with the
Yeah.
livestock. And little things like that, they don't ask for thanks. They don't it never crosses their mind. They just go and do and help and support. And for me, that's what makes the farming community, rural community so strong,
Mm.
is when times are hard, when chips are down, be that for a family or for the wider community, my God, do they pull together. And
Yeah.
they do it quietly. They do it without any desire for thanks or plaudits.
Mm.
And that's why I love that community so dear and fiercely and want to protect it, is they've done so much for not just my family, but for every family.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that we should cherish. And that's replicated across rural communities in all of the UK, and
Mm.
I'd say in other countries as well. But that personal experience for me was something that will stay with me forever as to why I owe a debt of gratitude to the rural communities and why I really enjoy championing them.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that we should be proud of.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, what are your thoughts? Let's get political again. What are your
Yeah.
thoughts on the partial U-turn on the family farm tax? And do you think it's enough?
So Labour are looking to fix their own mistake here.
Yeah.
So they brought this in. I was at the hustings in the general election in Pembrokeshire where the Labour candidate stood up and said there will be no changes to inheritance tax.
Mm.
Very first budget, those changes were announced. And I know a lot of farmers who either didn't vote at all or voted Labour for wanting quote unquote change.
Yeah.
And I think there's certainly a lot of buyer's remorse now.
Mm.
Does it go far enough? I don't think it does. I don't think it goes anywhere near far enough to firstly rebuild the relationship
Yeah.
with rural communities and Labour. Perhaps, and I'm hearing this anecdotally that Labour have realised, well, we can cast aside those 50 or so
Right.
rural Labour MPs that we won because we weren't expecting to win them.
Mm.
Thanks, but no thanks, guys. We're going to concentrate on things like introducing the ban on trail hunting, which
Yeah.
further alienates rural communities,
Hmm.
but tries to shore up their vote in cities where they're leaking to the Greens and other sort of quote unquote progressive left parties.
Yes.
Uh, it is. Again, it's this politics of envy that the
Mm.
left seem unable to ever move away from, be it private schools and VAT, be it trail hunting, be it inheritance tax. The lack of understanding of why this was a bad policy and how we were marched up the hill as farmers and rural communities and opposition politicians of we have to do this because we have
Right.
to balance the books,
Right.
to then to be told that the Treasury's figures were correct by the Treasury, but the figures that the NFU had, the figures that DEFRA were using were different. The figures that everybody else, bar the Treasury, had were showing that the Treasury were wrong. To then be marched down the hill ever so slightly with the increase of the threshold. Um, it's a government in turmoil
Mm.
around this one policy. And I just don't get what they're trying to achieve.
Yeah.
It's not a tax raising policy. We know that the NFU's clawback policy that they suggested would bring in more revenue to the Treasury. So are they going after the Dysons and the Clarksons?
Mm.
Well, that still doesn't quite um, negate the negative impact that this has on genuine family farms. And
Yes.
some would say that Jeremy Clarkson's Clarkson Farm program on Amazon has done more to advocate for agriculture than any government could do of any colour, of the
Absolutely.
trials and tribulations of working in rural communities, trying to run a business, a farm, and everything else that comes with it. And I just look at Labour over this whole inheritance tax saga, and I just pity them
Mm.
for their dog-headed inability to correct course, to put their hand up and admit that they've made a mistake. But why bring it in the first place?
Yeah.
And it comes back, and obviously this is the premier political podcast, Jamila. But when you
Thank
think
you.
of when you think of Ed Balls and George Osborne, and George Osborne talking about on his podcast the times that civil servants would put in front of him suggestions
Mm,
around this, and him saying no to it, yet a Labour Chancellor just accepts it at the very first opportunity. That then opens wider questions around how policy is formed within Whitehall. It's like civil servant led. And I'm an advocate for defending institutions. I'm a conservative. I defend what I think is good and
mm,
conserve it. And I enjoy a neutral civil service. I enjoy what they bring. But they have to have a bit of a question mark as to their desire to bring this policy in so many times under previous Conservative chancellors who
yeah.
always rejected it, but also to a Labour chancellor who accepted it at the very first opportunity.
Yeah, that's it. And also, like, the civil service aren't there to create policy. Like, we shouldn't be looking to the civil service to create policy. You should go in with an idea, a very clear idea of what you want to do. And the fact that the Chancellor didn't have a clear and literally just took anything that they threw at her just says so much about her, her judgment, her program for change. It's just all a bit, it's a bit
Yeah,
embarrassing.
it really is. And it goes to show that they were fighting the election on change, but that change meant nothing
Yeah,
because they had no policies. There was no vision. What is Starmerism? What is Reevesism? It's just management. There's
yeah,
no policy direction, which I think people are really fed up of. Is For right or wrong, politicians these days who've got a clear vision and direction and are determined to deliver,
yes,
explain something and determined to deliver it, people resonate with. And
yeah,
I think we have to get back to being more ideological somewhat in our policy,
yes,
and that's something I think is a real strength of Kemi Badenoch is
mm,
it is policy based on values.
yes,
What do we believe? Why do we believe it? And let's enact policies accordingly,
yeah.
which is hugely refreshing.
Absolutely. And Kemi obviously has done the hard thinking and still is like, how are we actually going to implement this? What are we going to need to get out of the way to make it happen? And that's obviously
Yeah,
what Labour didn't do.
yeah.
And just sticking on that kind of attack on rural communities, do you think that they announced this partial U-turn on the family farm tax just like what 3 days after the trail hunting ban? What was that about? And surely that it doesn't help anyone, it doesn't do anything, it's just virtue signaling, no?
It, I found the timing of it really interesting.
Mm,
Before Christmas, and it was an announcement made by DEFRA, not by the Treasury. So I
right.
reckon there's still, I have no inside sight, especially in Whitehall with a Labour government,
Yeah,
but I reckon there's still a lot of tension between DEFRA and the Treasury over this policy.
right.
And I reckon there are quite a few Labour MPs have spoken about pausing this. No, none of them have talked about scrapping it wholly, but most have talked about pausing, reassessing, which I think is a bit meek and meager language,
Mm,
really. But kudos to them for actually even talking about this policy. Um, and then with the trail hunting announcement as well, at the same within the 3 days as you mentioned, it feels like they're worried about potentially what could happen around rural um, protests.
mm,
That we've obviously seen protests of another level on the continent.
yeah,
French farmers really know how to protest
yeah,
when it comes when it comes to it. Whereas agricultural communities have protested far more civilly in the UK. I think they only had a slurry tanker filled with water in Whitehall once, rather than any actual slurry being
right.
spread or silage bales or straw bales being spread everywhere. And I like that because I think it keeps the wider communities and the wider society on agriculture's side.
Agree.
I don't like disruptive protesting for the sake of it. I don't think that benefits anybody.
Mhm.
It entrenches people, if anything. But I genuinely think this Labour government have no idea about rural communities,
No,
rural Wales, rural England, rural Scotland. It's just not on their radar. And so when someone talks about, oh, we'll ban trail hunting, they don't know what that means.
right.
It's not an animal rights issue because trail hunting isn't an animal rights.
Exactly.
It's been brought in because of the fears around the initial hunting ban with Blair back in the 90s. Um, Trail hunting was that happy medium which allowed hounds to be worked, which allowed the community benefit of hunts to exist, yet obviously appeased the animal rights activists who were very animated at the time. The ban on trail hunting, it does nothing.
Mm.
It's just virtue signaling. So this, I think, would be a government that just doesn't quite understand rural communities. It's completely disconnected,
Yeah.
parachuted in candidates into rural communities who then got elected, who aren't from those areas, who
Mm.
don't fully appreciate what it means, aren't involved in the fabric of those communities that they're representing. And this isn't a political issue,
Yeah.
right? Because there's a lot of communities in South Wales which elect Labour politicians who do have hunts, who do have rural areas. And those politicians who are rooted in those communities are far more skeptical about some of the things that Labour are doing, rather than some of those parachuted in candidates
Yeah.
who just see things as a signal from leadership up on high. We are doing
Yeah.
this. Get on board. Thanks very much.
Yeah.
So the strength of backbenchers at the moment, it's not where it needs to be.
No. And there was that one guy, the only Labour MP, and I salute him. I can't remember his name, but he was the only
Yeah.
one that stood up and didn't vote for the family farms tax. So we need people like that. I mean, even if you're not from a rural community, have some backbone, stand up for your constituents. That's your job, literally.
Absolutely. And I got a couple of text messages from ex-MPs after that vote, basically condemning those Labour MPs who abstained
Mm.
and say, look, that's just a nod and a wink from the whip to say, look, don't vote against, just keep your powder dry. You can
Yeah.
sell this to your constituents. That, I'm sorry, is nonsense.
Mm.
If you believe in something, stand by your values.
Yeah.
And I doff my cap to that one Labour MP
Yeah.
for having, well, he's no longer a Labour MP, but I
No,
think the
yeah,
whip should be
literally.
he should be reinstated
Which,
as a Labour MP. So it should be that is what we should have. But this is some of the wider political context of what's happening in Westminster at the moment, is that given the sheer size of the majority of Labour, the most opposition will come from their own backbenchers.
yeah,
So if they really wanted to show that they are against something, be that the inheritance tax, trail hunting, whatever it may be, then there's a critical mass of them who can make a difference.
yeah,
So let's see, watch this space. But I've not seen anything to really make me believe that that's going to come. It's only going to be on further left issues like the abolition of the two-child benefit cap, things like that,
yeah,
which Starmer will introduce to try and appease some grievances from more of the left-leaning MPs within his party.
yeah. And we're hearing more about the EU as well, which is just great
We are.
fun for everyone to just go back to 2016. So you are a Conservative, Sam, which is fantastic, and I'm grateful. Why did you want to join the Conservative Party? Were you always a Conservative, or was there a turning point in your life that you were like, this is the way to go?
Uh, my first election was the general election in 2010, and I voted for Stephen Crabb,
Nice.
the local MP who I'd met. Um, Seemed like he did a lot for the community, was from the community, and he was a Conservative. So I voted for him on the basis of knowing him more than
Right.
um, his politics. And then I went to university and studied politics to become a journalist. I wanted an in, and I'd always seen myself as more of the commentator on politics rather than an active involved in politics because I was never a member of any political party. I was never out campaigning as an 18, 19-year-old or anything like that. I was purposely keeping myself away from frontline politics to
Yeah.
try and give credence to a career in journalism.
Yeah.
But it was my lecturer, a tutor in one of my sessions on a one-to-one, who said, look, Sam, you're always defending conservative values in discussions. You're a conservative. What are you going to do with that? And that was the first time someone had said, you are a conservative. And
Yeah.
I found that quite interesting. I found it quite liberating as well, actually, in some regards, that this was obviously off the back of the 2010 general election, the coalition government. And I found it, right, okay, I am a conservative. I do know that my values align with a political party, and no one person can ever say that all their values are 100% within one party. I think
Right.
that's one of the beauties of politics is you have disagreements within your families, which I think is a strong place to be. Um, so I went into journalism, and it wasn't until I started building a relationship with the local MP's office, Stephen Crabb's, through journalism, that I actually thought about a career in politics and what that would look like. And I ended up leaving journalism to work in his office as a senior communications officer.
Mm.
And that was in 2016. council elections were coming around in 2017, and my home ward, where the farm on which I grew up and where I lived, was being contested and had an independent candidate. And Stephen and I were just chatting in the office one day, and he said, "Oh, why don't you put your name forward?"
Mm.
There's a sort of shock, rabbit in headlights moments of going, "What, me? No." And I said, "But I haven't been in the party long enough. I haven't earned my keep, as it were." And he
Mm.
said, "No, that's fine. It's like actually politics needs people from outside of the sort of
Yeah.
political machinery to be successful." So I went about it and stood and got elected, beat the incumbent.
Mm.
And that's when I was like, "Oh, okay, I can get my teeth into something here."
Yeah.
And working for Stephen was what I say is the best apprenticeship I ever
Mm.
did, was working for a brilliant local and Westminster MP. Learned a lot, learned how to do things, how not to do things, how I would do things differently, I felt, which was good because no politician should be exactly the same to any
Right.
other. So I owe a huge debt of gratitude to Stephen in the training that I had in working in his office. And it was just after the general election in 2019. He said, "Right, come on, what do you want to do with your life? You're not going to work for me forever." And I said, "Oh, well, actually, 2021, the Senedd elections are coming up. I'm proud to be Welsh, proud to be British, but I think I've got something to contribute to Welsh politics." He said, "Great, right, okay, let's see how we can help you do that."
Yeah.
I've loved it. It's been challenging. It's been good fun. It's had ups, downs. It's taught me things about myself that I would never have learned otherwise. It's taught me things about my community, about the need for kindness in our society. That's
Yeah.
one of my sort of real takeaways from this job is every time we canvass a door, knock on a door, speak to a constituent, we never fully know what's going on in their lives. We
Yeah.
never fully know the trials and tribulations they're having. And they might come to us hating the party, hating a policy that we've enacted in Westminster when we were in government, something that we stand for as Welsh Conservatives. And we are the face of that party. So
Right.
we accept it within reason. We don't accept abuse for no reason, but within reason we accept it, knowing that that person might be going through some really tough times.
Mm.
So all we can do is be kind. And I've had some interesting engagements with people who've come back a week, 2 weeks later, after having a bit of uh, back and forth, shall we say, who've just thanked me for, look, I disagree with you, but thank you for just giving me the time of day. I appreciate it, and I
Mm.
can see that you're trying hard. And while we disagree, I'd rather have someone try for their community that I disagree with than someone I agree with not trying.
Yeah.
So I'm quite proud of that, and I think being a conservative is really important. We need conservative policies. We need conservative values, and the strength of the family, the conserving what is good, is understanding the need of strong communities, the rule of law, personal responsibility,
Yeah.
and one of my key takeaways is growing up watching the 10 o'clock news a lot with, especially with my dad, but with my parents, and seeing what's going on in the world. And thinking, always in the back of my mind, there was this politics looks like an interesting place to be, and
Yeah.
I don't mean to sort of labour cliches, but in the Hamilton musical, when Aaron Burr is singing about being in the room where it happens,
Yes.
there's
Yes.
something quite addictive. There's something quite addictive about that,
Mm.
and I can see it why people are drawn to this job. But my word, I never think this is a job for life.
Mm.
There's a the election in May. There's a high likelihood that I won't be re-elected in this new electoral system. And that's okay. Like political careers come and go, and that's okay. I'm quite philosophical on it. And I've never been one who's wanted to do this for 30, 40 years because I
Mm.
think we need new ideas, new generations coming through. Um, but I still believe I have something to contribute. And I'll be going into the next election with a pretty clear mandate on what I want to do, what I want to achieve locally, things that I've had successes on in the last 5 years of my time as an MS. Um, but it's a huge honor and a privilege, and anybody in public service will attest to that, whatever party they're from.
Yeah.
This is, yeah, it's really quite something.
Oh, I love that, Sam. We're all hoping because you're fantastic that you get re-elected again. So, what is your pitch to the public for May? Why should people be voting Wales and voting Conservative in Wales? Why should they be voting for us? Why should they be voting for you? What's your pitch?
Well, we've got this new electoral system in Wales in May where it's fully proportional. It's a full D'Hondt method. So the 32 Westminster constituencies have been paired together to create 16 super constituencies. And in those 16 super constituencies, 6 members will be elected. So 16 times 6 is your 96 members of the Senedd. So I'm number 2 on our list, behind Paul Davies, who's the deputy leader of the Welsh Conservatives. And there's a probability that I could get elected. I need 1 in 5, about that 20% of the vote to get elected, and that's wholly doable. I think some of the polling in Wales is a bit skewed at the moment, and I think the Westminster polling in Wales is a bit more accurate, especially where we're hearing it on the door.
Mhm.
Um, so, for example, Mid and South Pembrokeshire constituency currently has Reform winning it on the current poll, but we're only 3 points behind.
Right.
So it's a 1.5 point swing, really, and we don't know who the Reform candidates are. They've got no leader in Wales, so we're local in our areas, track record, and we're going out to sell that hard. So why would people firstly want to vote Welsh Conservative at the next Senedd election in May? Firstly, we're the only party currently in the Senedd who've never been in power. We've only ever been in opposition, and we have stood steadfast against these policies that Labour, Plaid Cymru, and the Liberal Democrats have brought forward, from agricultural policies to educational policies to the health policies, 20 mile an hour, all these nonsense things that have made Wales a bit of a laughing stock. There's only one party that stood steadfast against that and opposed it, and that's the Welsh Conservatives. But we have a plan to fix Wales. We have genuinely put together a policy platform costed from taking in feedback from general people, not just listening to the big lobbyist agencies who want to chatter the
Right.
ear off politicians for their own personal interest. The person on the street, what matters to you? When I'm knocking on a door in Pembroke Dock, in a traditionally industrial area, former Labour heartland, and I'm talking to someone, I say, what do you want from a Welsh government?
Yeah.
That's the kind of policies that we're putting forward, for May, and I'm incredibly proud of that platform that we're looking at, and that's pro economy, that's pro farming, that's pro family, that's pro choice when it comes to accessing education, healthcare, and it's pro the ability for someone in Wales to get on in life.
Yes.
And for too long in Wales, it's felt like if you want to succeed, you have to leave Wales.
Yeah.
And I don't begrudge people leaving Wales, but I want those people to have equal opportunity in Wales, England, Scotland, further afield, wherever, or to have to put Wales on a better platform and saying we want our young, brightest, and best staying in Wales to make a success for them and their country here. That's what I want. But why vote for me in the new constituency of Ceredigion Penfro, which is a massive constituency which encompasses the Ceredigion Preseli Westminster constituency, which is Ben Lake, Plaid Cymru MP, and the Mid and South Pembrokeshire constituency, which is Henry Tufnell, the Labour MP.
Right.
So we are going up against the incumbent First Minister in Eluned Morgan, the Labour First Minister. She is my
Wow.
opponent.
Oh God.
So there's going to be all eyes on my constituency
No
at the
pressure,
election
Sam.
time, which I love a bit of pressure, Jamila. I love it. I like getting out there. I like sleeves rolled up. I like canvassing and speaking to people.
Yeah.
But why vote for me? Firstly, this is where the humble brags come out, and I'm not very good at this. But in 5 years, I've managed to get quite a few successes locally. Seen hugely long overdue road improvements on the Nash Fingerpost Junction on the A470. That junction has seen too many fatalities over the years. Finally, after intense lobbying, we've got the improvements, and that's been welcomed by the wider community. Big tick there. I am fighting for my community. There's no bank now in all of South Pembrokeshire. So we're fighting on bringing services back to our communities. And when the system and computer says no, I challenge that. I don't accept that, because my communities deserve the same services that other communities have.
Yeah.
And so that's something that I've got a track record that I'm very proud of standing up for my community. And because it's my community, these are my friends that I represent. These are my family members that I represent, looking
Yeah.
to represent. These are people who will quickly bring me back down to earth if I get too big for
Yeah.
my boots. Who say, look, Kurtz, you're talking nonsense here. This is what you need to focus on. And that grounding is really important.
Mm.
And I think as a team between Paul Davies and myself, we've got a bloody good track record that we can stand up and say, look, you know what you're going to get from us.
Yeah,
You're going to get two hardworking individuals who are fighting hard, who put our communities first. Yes, we're conservatives and we're proud to be conservatives.
absolutely.
But when it comes to our communities and representing what's best for the people we have the honor of representing, we'd like to think that we're two of the hardest working, dedicated MSs going. And it's been an honor and a privilege, and we don't want it to end.
I love that. And you mentioned this earlier, but you said somewhere, I think it was on a video. I watched one of your videos about the train station. I really liked that video, so it was very good.
Thanks. Thank
Um,
you.
so hopefully you get more investment in that train station, which you've already secured some. So well done.
Thank you.
Uh, but in that video, you did say that, my job is to represent South Pembrokeshire. So what do you love about it? Why should we put it on our staycation list for 2026?
Right. So if we're that video that you mentioned there is about Tenby and the railway station in Tenby. Now, Tenby is the jewel in the tourism crown of Pembrokeshire. Golden beaches. It's a fantastic destination, brilliant businesses, warm welcome. If you want a staycation in the UK, you will find fewer places better than Tenby. But Tenby's not alone because then next door you've got Saundersfoot, its little sister, with beautiful beach of its own and fantastic businesses there as well, and a different kind of charm to Tenby. But if you're not someone looking to enjoy the beaches and enjoy more of your countryside walks, then you've got
Mhm.
the Preseli Hills in
Oh,
Pembrokeshire as well, where you've got some brilliant mountains, which currently are covered in about 4 foot of snow.
yeah.
So bring your skis if you're coming in the next 24 hours. But there's something for everybody here as well, because we've got fantastic attractions like Folly Farm, Wild Lakes, the dinosaur park, loads of different things. They're not real dinosaurs, by the way. They are
Yeah.
just to clarify for listeners. But we've got some brilliant attractions, and then you've got those fantastic small businesses, those
Yeah.
SMEs who go the extra mile. We're not somewhere that's overrun with chains. We're still a very independent, dominated business sector, which is to be welcomed, and I really love that. In Larne, you've got Dylan Thomas, the famous Welsh poet, his
Wow.
boathouse, where he wrote some of his most famous
Wow.
plays, Under Milk Wood, which is based on Larne and Llansteffan. Llaregib was the
Love
name of the town, which is bugger all backwards, Llaregib.
it.
So Dylan Thomas
Epic.
enjoyed a turn of phrase. And that was filmed in Pembrokeshire as well, in Fishguard in Lower Town, the famous film from the 1970s, I think it was. So we've got a lot to draw people in here. And my parents have worked in the tourism hospitality sector.
Yeah.
And one of the things that we get, and not to downplay any other area of the UK, but one of the things that we're told often is we're like Cornwall without some of the commercialization. So if that's a selling point for people, then you know to come to West Wales because you'll be in for a good time.
Amazing. Well, Sam, I think you've done a very good job of speaking up for Wales, just in general as a nation. You're a fantastic representative, and I hope we can get you elected again. And everyone go and vote for Sam if you can.
Thank you very much. Cheers, Jamila.